Hello, everybody. It's really, really nice to be here, and I'm honoured to be opening this day. Wherever you're watching, so if you're at home, if you're at work, I can see there's exactly 100 people watching right now, and that number keeps going up. So sit back, enjoy the day, but also be prepared to take action. This is about how we can do more, as Maria says, to make our workplaces more inclusive. So I thought I'd do three things really. One is I'll sort of talk about who am I, what am I doing here, what qualifies me to be opening this day, and you can be the judge of that once you've heard what I've got to say. Then I thought about well, why is it that we're here? Why is it that in 2021 we still have to have an international day against homophobia, transphobia and biphobia? Why is that? And there are some really powerful statistics that I have read recently. And then the final thing I thought was I'd try and end on a kind of happy note and think, well, what is it we can do? What would make life better for all of us? So let me just start a little bit with a bit about me. So I'm the president of the Hfma, and I'm really proud of that. So originally I'm an accountant, and I'm the first president who's done it for 2 years because, of course, we're in a pandemic, and last year was a bit of an odd year. It's all very virtual. But as president of the Hfma, and from that you'll infer I'm an accountant and a very happy accountant. I was a CFO for many years, and now I'm a CEO, and I'm enjoying that as much. Actually, it's really interesting. So if anyone wants to have a chat about careers later, see me. But my theme for the last year and this year, I've carried it forward, is taking pride in our future. And I did that for two reasons. One, because I wanted to think forward rather than back. We spend a lot of our time as accountants in the rearview mirror. I wanted to think about the future. I wanted to think about the workforce. I wanted to think about digital futures. This is all pre-pandemic. And the other thing was that I'm really proud of who I am. I'm wearing my rainbow lanyard, which I've worn for a number of years. I've got various rainbow badges, which I hope you're going to talk about later here. I'm a lesbian, and I have been for a long time, and I'm really proud of that. So I wanted to have pride in my theme because I thought that we should talk more about inclusion, about what it means to be different, about diversity, about why a diverse workplace is a better workplace, all sorts of diversity, actually. So that's why I chose the theme, taking pride in our future. So it gives me great pleasure to be able to talk to you now about some of the things that are really, really important to me. So I came out in the 1980s. I came out, I went to college, so I'm very privileged. I went to London School of Economics, which was a progressive, very liberal university. But the climate actually was quite interesting. So some of you probably aren't old enough to remember something called Section 28, which prohibited local authorities from even mentioning homosexuality in the classroom, even when kids asked for it. So there was quite a difficult climate. There was a very, very conservative government, which was sending out very different signals to today's conservative government. I went on my first march against Section 28 when I was about 18, 19. And my friends took very radical action. I wasn't quite as radical as them. Some of them abseiled into the House of Lords. Some of them invaded the BBC News and got sat on by a BBC presenter. You can Google that. And these are my people. I was very involved in politics. I was involved in grassroots campaigning. There was an organisation called ACT UP, which was the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, which was a movement really trying to end discrimination against people who had AIDS and effectively bring about the end of that pandemic. So I know we're in the midst of another pandemic, but there have been others in our living memory. And I spent my weekends involved with an organisation called Food Chain, which took food to people who had AIDS, or people in families where someone had AIDS, and where we took them nutritious food because they couldn't go out, or because they were being discriminated against. So that was kind of my late teens, early 20s. If you watched the program It's a Sin recently, that gives you a little taste of what life was like. So that's when I came out. So that was then, and this is now. And of course, life has changed, hasn't it? So I have witnessed the law change to allow me to get civilly partnered, which I am, to my partner Helen. I've been with her for about 20 years. And we haven't gone married, but we could. I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. And we have a kid. We have an adopted child. The law changed in 2010 to allow people like me to adopt. However, I still have the letter from Westminster Council that told me that I couldn't adopt because I was gay, and they'd reached their quota. And I can show you this letter, and I remember being really shocked. So life is quite different. For those of you that are watching this who are LGBTQ, anywhere on that spectrum, you probably think like me that every day is coming out day. I have to come out every day, so you know I have to remind people of who I am quite often. And I've got so many anecdotes that I could tell, but I remember I used to be the finance director at the Hfma Hospital in Hackney in East London, and I remember I got civilly partnered to Helen while I was there, and I remember the week after I came in, and I had an audit committee, and I was wearing a ring. I don't know if you can see that, but here's my my partnership ring. And I remember sitting in the audit committee, and the chair of the audit committee said, "Oh, Caroline, you've got a new ring. Who's the lucky man?" And I'm thinking, "Oh no, I have to do it again in front of all these people." And it's just like that, isn't it? It just, you know, and I think, you know, that was 14 years ago. More recently, 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, when I got this job, to be a chief executive of a foundation trust, your governors need to endorse your appointment. Well, at least that was our process. And you'd imagine in kind of leafy North London, progressive North London, this would just be a bit of rubber stamping. But it wasn't completely straightforward, and one of the governors objected because of my sexuality. And I have to say that the action of my board, and my chairman in particular, to put the situation right was phenomenal. And I have never felt so protected in my workplace. And I want to make sure that what happened to me there doesn't happen to anybody else, and that my board will always act in that way. So these are stories, you know, you'll all have your own stories, but those are two of mine. And I suppose I want every person in my organisation to be treated fairly, and as I have been, regardless of their characteristics. I wonder how finance departments are. In my experience, sometimes they can be really inclusive, but sometimes they can't. I think in this virtual world, it's harder to be inclusive. I have a real thing that when you join an organisation, the way you join the organisation determines how you're going to be. So you need to be really, when you've got new colleagues coming in, welcome them with open arms. Actually, I promised Maria and Megan I wasn't going to get all political, but today is the day the government says we can hug everyone. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure that I'm going to, I don't need the government to tell me whether I can hug someone, but do virtually hug people that join the organisation and welcome them in. I think it really does determine how you feel as an individual and how colleagues feel around you. So, and you know, how you enter an organisation is really important. So the only other thing I was going to say was, as the CEO of the Royal Free, one of the proudest things I've ever done, apart from adopting my daughter, which was probably the proudest thing, was we took a float on Gay Pride in London 2 years ago, and it says sort of NHS Royal Free on it, and it was an open back float, and we had kind of disco music and stuff, and it was amazing, just amazing. So I give you, and I went with some allies. I went with quite a lot of my colleagues who didn't necessarily identify like me, and they said it was one of the most extraordinary things they've ever done. So I give you the possibility, when we're allowed to, of pride. So that's why me, and a little bit about sort of my lived experience, and hopefully that kicks you off and gets you into the conversation later on. And I bet you've all got stories a bit like that. So I then thought I should just say, well, why are we here? Why is it? I mean, there's a bit about my experience, but what about everybody else? So, and I thought a couple of things. I thought about what's going on in Northern Ireland at the moment with the new leadership of the DUP. We're still having a debate on gay conversion therapy. So take nothing for granted. I think that's shocking. I've seen that debate happen many, many times over my lifetime. And I can't quite believe we're still having it. We want to build inclusive workplaces because, of course, they're better for everybody. We make better decisions with an empowered, included and diverse workforce. If we keep debating the same old problems with the same old people, we end up with the same old solutions. And if there's one thing that we've learned during COVID, it is that we need new solutions. And for me, promoting diverse workplaces and inclusive workplaces, because you can't be really diverse unless you're inclusive, is utterly fundamental to how we recover from COVID. So I think FFF promoting this day, and you guys sitting here listening to each other and hopefully having some dialogue later on, is really fundamental to actually our COVID recovery. So, and of course, you know, there is a growing movement for EDI, for equality, diversity, inclusion anyway, and rightly so. And this is part of that. And I just think it's so important. But if you want some specific stats about why we're here, and here's the shocker and the serious bit of my talk. So Stonewall is the big LGBTQ plus lobbying and policy organisation. They've got a really good website if you're interested. They've done some really good research, and they do kind of quite big surveys. So let me just tell you some of the stuff that they have found. So internationally, 72 countries still criminalise same-sex relationships. 25% of the world's population still thinks that being LGBT should be a crime. So I would be put in prison potentially for loving who I love and having the child that I have. So that is extraordinary, isn't it? More locally, 1 in 5 LGBT people have experienced a hate crime in the last year. That was in 2017-18, but you know, that's fairly current, isn't it? Over a third of us aren't open at work, and 18% of us have experienced some kind of discrimination at work. And that I find really heartbreaking. Only 46% of us are open with our families, so 54% of us aren't. I came out, I tried to come out to my mother and I failed, and she died not knowing I was gay. I did come out to my father, but it was in his later life and he was a bit confused, so I kept forgetting. But I think it was a slightly happier story. But I think, you know, and that was quite a long time ago. But I think, you know, people, this is still an issue for many people, isn't it? So 52% of LGBT people have experienced depression. 1 in 8 have experienced some form of unequal treatment in healthcare. That's really important. We have a duty to rectify that. And 1 in 4 have witnessed negative remarks from healthcare staff. So if I think about, you know, I've had hospital treatment, and I've been very clear with everyone about my sexuality, and it's never been a debate. But if my partner hadn't been allowed to visit me, or my daughter hadn't been allowed to visit me, and actually that is, I know actually over the last year that has been the case for many, many people, but imagine if that was always the case. That's too much, isn't it? So there are some really, really shocking statistics. I've got one more, which is that 5% of people have changed their sexual orientation to access services, so they've lied. 20% of trans people have been pressured to suppress their gender identity in order to get into NHS services. So these statistics remind us of why we're here and why we need to do this work. And for me, they give me kind of an added bit of energy. So what can we do? I said I'd end on the sort of happy, sunny uplands. And then if you've got questions, I'm really happy to take them. And I think Maria and I are going to sort of chat about that in a couple of minutes. So let me just finish off by saying, well, what is it that we can do about all this? So the first thing I think is just talk about it. Make it okay to talk about it. Today, May the 17th, every year makes it okay to talk about it. But of course, you need to talk about it all the time. You need to make it okay to talk about it. And that's for all of us, whether we're allies or whether we're part of the LGBTQ plus community. Be out and proud and be a role model if you can. That's what I'm trying to do. It is an effort. You have to put your game face on, and really it is quite effortful, but I feel like I owe it to everybody in my organisation who might be struggling to do that. And I'm gonna continue to do that. I think if you get a chance on forms to register gender, sexuality, difference, do it. And make a point of it. Use the rainbow flag. I know you're going to talk about that later. I'm really pleased about that, because of course it gives you a chance to again just keep talking about these issues. By the way, you may all have, you know the NHS has also got a rainbow flag, and in the last year that's been very, very heavily promoted as part of the efforts to treat the COVID crisis, people with COVID. And of course, there's been a bit of a debate, hasn't there, about whose rainbow flag is it? For the record, I think we can share the rainbow flag. I think it's the whole point of the rainbow flag is that it's inclusive and that everybody can use it, and that's really important. And it came, I think, originally from the peace movement. I think it was used in the 1920s. So, and actually, there's some really interesting history about the rainbow flag and its different incarnations. So in the 60s, it was used by the gay movement in San Francisco. Some of you may have heard of Harvey Milk, who was a protester that was tragically killed, and they had a different looking rainbow flag, but it was hard to print, so they lost one of the colours. But anyway, it's worth reading about. So anyway, that's a rainbow flag. I think there's a really big thing for me about calling out bad behaviour. If you hear stuff, call it out. So my little girl, who's 11 now, is really good at calling stuff out. She, you know, some of the kids in her school just make stupid remarks, and she's definitely had a bit of stuff about having two mums, and she just calls it out. I'm so proud of her. And I think if she can do that, we can do it. So that is something for all of us on this call. I think forming networks is really important, again, to give people a safe space to talk about this stuff, to make friends, to realise that you're not alone. You're never alone with all these issues. Most people somewhere have experienced something of what you're feeling. And then the final thing I wanted to say is, you know, there will be Pride events, local and national. They may be virtual for another year or two, but if you get a chance, go on them, show solidarity, have fun. There is joy in this movement. There is joy in diversity, and there is joy in supporting other people and celebrating all those things that are very human. So I'm going to stop now. It's weird doing this because I can't see you all, but Maria, hopefully you're going to come back, and then our colleagues will be able to see both of us. So thank you for listening to me, and welcome back, Maria. Hello.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. As always, yeah, very, very interesting content you gave us there. So many things there. I mean, actually, the next question, you've answered some of it, but hopefully both of you can have some thoughts on it. I mean, certainly one of the things that I think about is the tangible things that you just mentioned there about, you know, the rainbow badge, the lanyard, even though I haven't got it on because I'm not in the office, you see, that's the problem. But all of that, and you know, Pride and the networks and so on and so forth. But a lot of that is about the people that are with us, you know, the allies, the people that buy into this. The people on this call will be, you know, they're the ones that already agree with us, if you know what I mean. There's a phrase there, I can't remember what it is, but anyway, but essentially, you know, they really agree with us. But how do we, I suppose, reach all those people that aren't on this call today, all the people that have got ingrained? I mean, I can give you some examples of where I've had, you know, experiences of, you know, where people just get it wrong, you know, unaware, don't know what they're doing with it. How do we try and reach them, I guess?
Yeah.
The question actually says, what more can we do in finance, in the NHS, to make it more of a fully inclusive service? But I guess that's all part of that.
Okay, let me have a go. So the first thing is, of course, the people that have done most for me in my life to radically alter the course of my life are straight men. So Tony Blair and David Cameron adjusted the law to make it okay for me to civilly partner with my partner and to adopt a kid. Who would have thought it? So you're quite right, Maria. Our allies are going to be the most important people in this, in a sense. So what I would say to them is, help us talk about it. Talk about it yourselves. Be really open about these things. You know, the world is different to how it was in the 1980s, for sure. In our liberal democracy, we do talk much more. One of the things that we did in my organisation was we've got these things called Schwartz rounds, where staff in the organisation, 4 or 5 of them, will get together and talk about quite difficult experiences. And there's an audience, anybody can pitch up, and we've been doing a lot of them virtually. And we've held a couple of Schwartz rounds about what it means to be gay. We held one on what it was like as a healthcare professional to be excluded, not included. And where people have got it wrong, Maria. So we are quite, and there were some allies talking on that about where they'd got it really wrong. And that was a really helpful kind of learning experience. So I think my strong advice is to treat all this as a way of learning in organisations rather than a way of making people feel bad, because everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes with, I think I told you, my friend's son is transitioning, and I make mistakes with my grammar with them all the time. And but they forgive me for it because I'm on a journey with them, you know. And that is a, you know, we have to forgive ourselves, but I think we have to also just tell these stories. And I think this exchange of lived experience is quite important. I find it quite hard to talk about it sometimes, actually, partly because I have to dig up from a long time ago, and partly because actually I'm you know, I am actually quite private. So, you know, but I think it's important for us to do that. So I think that's a yeah. So it's learning, and it's supposed to help. And tell the stories, find the humor in it as well. Like, you know, I know that I can't take myself too seriously. I mean, I get, you know, if I did, you know, people wouldn't want to talk to me. So you have to find humor in it as well. So I can see Maria here. There's a question here about what personal advice could you share to anyone attending today who isn't visibly out at work yet but wants to be. And I suppose I was just thinking about that, thinking, gosh, so how did I come out? I don't know how you came out, but I found some friends who I trusted, and I told them, and I asked them. Often when I'm not sure about something, I ask people's advice, and I genuinely mean it. So I'll go to somebody and just say, well, what would you do if you were me, and how would you approach this? And, you know, remember that, you know, when you're, it won't be something that's really big for you, won't be as big for other people. This is what I've learned. So, you know, me coming out felt like catastrophically huge for me, but most people are like, oh, I knew that, you know, like that. And it's kind of, so there is something around, you know, and most people want you to be yourself with them and be open with them. So I think you find people that you trust, and you do it in small steps. Everything feels really big if you do it all at once, like a big ta-da. So for me, it's the small step thing, and then it just becomes easier. And but I remember that feeling. I feel slightly sick thinking about when I didn't really properly come out until my mum died, actually. So you know, and I lost my 20s. I had a great relationship with someone who I could never really be honest with my mum about, because I just couldn't do it, and I really regret that. Wish I just ballsed it out with my mum, and I didn't. So yeah. So here's another question here, Maria. I've just realised the time, so I'm just kind of
go for it, yeah.
So there's how do you move the agenda forward? Well, I wonder, I don't know. So if I was, I don't know about you, Maria, right? If I was listening to this and I was in a finance team, I think, well, I might go back and then just have the next team meeting and say, hey, I attended this thing that FFF did the other day, and how can we do it? And again, ask your colleagues' advice. It's you know, put it on the agenda. If you've got team meetings, put it on the agenda. If you haven't got team meetings, you should be having team meetings. So invent some and then put it on the agenda, I think. That's what I would do. And then just see what people say. And then, you know, and then invite people to speak. You'll find there's loads of good speakers you've got for the rest of this day, haven't you? So kind of bringing them in and asking them if they'll come and just do a, you know, 20-minute, well, this is what we did, all that stuff. I mean, it's like social movement, isn't it? That's how these things start. So I think just ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. That's the other thing I find. So, and usually when people ask me stuff, I say yes, or I find somebody else that can help. And I don't think I'm unusual. I think everyone's a bit like that. So, and I think the challenge is to make finance departments the most inclusive part of the organisation. That is my challenge to everybody on this call today, all 116 of you. Just make it so that the rest of your organisation, be you ICS, Commissioner, Mental Health Trust, Community Trust, Acute Trust, give everyone FOMO about what you're doing in your department. There's no reason why you can't, and I think that's the challenge I would aspire to.
Thank you, Caroline. Is there any other questions there? Sorry,
well, I can see there's a Schwartz. Yeah, there's a Schwartz round one which says, "How do I get more info on the Schwartz round?" So there is actually an organisation that promotes Schwartz rounds, and I can't remember what it's called, but I think if you Googled them, you'd find out. We actually have rebranded them something else, but to be honest, you could just start it off, couldn't you? So ours are run by our psychologists, because actually the reason for doing it is about helping professionals with kind of the care process and downloading and talking about issues generally is something that our psychology teams want us to do. So that's how we came into it. And if you've got psychologists in your hospital or your trust or your CCG, then I would start there. And if you don't, if people want more information, I can find out